Welcome back to Bridge 4 Games. I'm Tom, and as we all get settled into Series 10, today we just kind of want to look at the meta-analysis, usage stats, restricteds, items that we're seeing pretty frequently out there on the ladder and in tournaments, and how we can maybe optimize some of our teams using that information. So we're going to look pretty heavily into Pikalytics today, but some other resources that I have in here will also link in the description down below that we recommend that you check out. They're all things that we use pretty frequently here on Bridge 4 Games. You've seen us use Pokemon Showdown and the damage calculator a lot when we're team building, as well as Cerebi.net or Bulbapedia. And Victory Road VGC is just really good information out there from different tournaments that are going on. So let's jump right into it and let's take a look at Pikalytics. Alright, over here we are going to select, it's usually defaulted, but we're going to make sure that we're selected to Series 10 VGC 2021, and we see here, no surprise, Incineroar being the #1 Pokemon out there. Anyone that's playing on the ladder, this is not shocking. You're probably seeing this on almost every team. Really, with 68% usage, it's just absolutely everywhere and must be respected and checked. Incineroar has been one of those Pokemon that has just been impactful in any format that it's been a part of since it came out. Second up here we have Rilaboom, and we also notice here on the Incineroar, if we look over here on the left, that's the teammates. So on almost 70% of teams we see Incineroar, and 50% of those teams, 54% of those teams also has a Rilaboom on it. So just incredibly high usage stats. And then rounding that off, in the third slot here, we have Regieleki. So this core just seems to be absolutely running everywhere. So even when you look at, for instance, Rilaboom, if you click on Rilaboom, then its top 2 teammates, Incineroar and Regieleki. And if we look at Regieleki, our top 2 teammates that we have with that Regieleki are Incineroar and Rilaboom. Very important when we are really, making our teams and thinking about our team composition, because it's just, it has to be respected, it has to be checked, and you have to understand that where you're seeing one, you're usually seeing 2 or 3 of these Pokemon at a time. In the 4th slot is Urshifu Rapid Strike. So that's, again, not surprising. Its top 3 teammates, Incineroar, Rilaboom, Regieleki. That's because those 3 are everywhere. But also, that Urshifu Rapid Strike really rounds out a core of, fire, water, grass. And then also with Incineroar, the dark and the fighting as well. So not surprising here when we look at Urshifu Rapid Strike, and again, the Regieleki, the water, the electric. So it's just these 4 Pokemon not being restricted and having such high usage is really just meta-defining. Next up, and we've seen it down the list a little bit here when we looked at the teammates and usage, is Landorus. So Landorus I is really running around, and that's because it does have the ground immunity to opposing Regielekis. And, the special moves that it has, that it's carrying on it most frequently, Earth Power, Sludge Bomb. We see here at 99% of the time it has Earth Power. 93% of the time it has Sludge Bomb. It being a special mon is, first and foremost with Rilaboom or with Incineroar everywhere, it's not taking those intimidates. Its stats are not being lowered because it's on the special side. And then it is able to hit things like an opposing Incineroar for super effective damage with that Earth Power. As well, it's able to hit with Sludge Bomb into things like Rilaboom, into things like the Xerneas that we saw early on, even Amoonguss. I mean, there's ways now to get around using some of those, and so it's not surprising that the usage picked up. One of the things I do want to point out is kind of as we look down the list a little bit at some of the other moves that it's frequently carrying. I mean, 37% of the time, it's also carrying Rock Slide, which means a lot of times these Landorus team builders are looking at making more of a mixed attacker, right? So it's both special and physical, which is just really interesting for this meta. And I would say, you know, maybe one of the more surprising things that's come out of this meta is some of the mixed attackers that I've seen. In Landorus being, I think, a primary example, because I think it's viable on both the special and the physical side. Looking next, you know, we actually have our first of the restricteds, and that is Zashian Crown. So Zashian, not surprising at all, you know, being up there. I know it was a highly anticipated restricted mon, and you know, it did actually really well in a format where Dynamax was there. And so now that Dynamax is not there, it's certainly, to me, not surprising that it's really kind of running the table as the #1 spot as far as usage. Next up, we have Volcarona, and really Volcarona is a pretty cool tech that we've seen since early on testing in tournaments. We saw Volcarona a lot, you know, paired with Xerneas, because it does get redirection from like a Rage Powder as well. You know, it can actually pair well because of the typing that it has. You know, being the bug fire type, so a lot of times, you know, you'll see that Volcarona, and you know, it's tough to deal with. You know, it really didn't thrive in Dynamax because of some of the other Mons and Dynamax moves. I mean, Max Airstream can just wipe it out. You know, but you know, without Dynamax, it's actually a pretty viable Pokemon. We're also seeing, just kind of swinging down here a little bit to the item usage on the Volcarona, Citrus Berry. So if it's not outgoing, we are able to get some of our health back, which is really helpful. Safety Goggles to stay away from other Rage Powders, making sure it doesn't go to sleep. Rocky Helmet is one of those items I feel like you know, I've used and I've liked, and I've used and I didn't. But ultimately, being able to get a little bit of chip damage if you're getting hit on the physical side is actually pretty helpful. So we see some leftovers, a couple other random items down here. I don't think too much of note, but it's a really cool mon that's picked up usage for sure in Series 10. And I think coming into, you know, before the preview tournaments, something I really didn't think much of, but it makes just a ton of sense when you look at some of the pairings up there. It works on Xerneas teams, it works without, right? So, you know, we look at Volcarona's teammates, you know, and obviously you have the Rilaboom, Incin, Lecky, but then you also have that Xerneas, right? So 45% of the time, 44% of the time, when you see Volcarona, you're also seeing Xerneas. And that's not surprising. And on the flip side of that, you know, 47% of the time when you're seeing Xerneas, you're also seeing Volcarona, you're also seeing Incin, you know, 86% of the time. Regieleki 60% of the time. Rilaboom 52% of the time. So these you know, it seems like a lot of the teams are very well defined. I'm very interested to see, and certainly in the comments down below, please let us know what you think. But I really am hoping that as this meta progresses, some of these start to flatten out a little bit, and so we don't see such high usage of 1 or 2 or really even 6 you know, standard Pokemon. We have a lot of very defined teams, or teams that may have 5 of the same or very similar Pokemon, and then maybe 1 additional, you know, that you may not think of, something that's a little bit more niche. And, you know, I think we'll see it down the list a little bit, like the Serena. I think kind of picked up immediately. You know, when the Series 10 preview was coming out, I think it did really well on some Kyogre teams. But then its usage, I think, started to slip back down just a little bit because Rilaboom just kind of still was, you know, the better option for that grass mon and that grass core. But moving on, before we get there, we do want to talk real quick about the little mushroom, who really struggled in a Dynamax format. There were way too many things that threatened it down between Max Flare, and really Max Flare and Max Airstream, that just made Amoonguss like unusable. It really just, it went out there, it got targeted down, it was always a threat, but because it's such a threat, you know, it wasn't able to take advantage of the bulk that it naturally has, as well as Regenerator. But without Dynamax, we actually see the resurgence of Amoonguss, and I love it. Amoonguss is a really fun mon to play with, and a really annoying mon to play against. You know, we see the Spore, the Rage Powder, the Clear Smog is really good, and in this format as well, it gets Pollen Puff, which is amazing to give some health back to our team. We are seeing it most used on either a Xerneas team or a Zashian team, but actually a pretty decent mix, right? So we see it on about 30%, 33, 34% of Xerneas teams, and about 23% of Zashian teams. And those are by far the two, well, I guess Zashian is by far the most used, restricted with Xerneas behind it. But Xerneas, Kyogre, Calorics, Shadow, I think those are actually pretty even in the number 2 slot. But I really love the movesets that we're seeing on the Amoonguss. It seems like people are getting a little bit creative here with the items, with the Mental Herb, not surprising, you know, as much as we're going to want to taunt that when we see it. Citrus Berry, again, we recover some health. A couple of the Resist Berries as well, if we kind of see that coming. I don't know that Focus Sash makes as much sense anymore on Amoonguss. I think Focus Sash this might just be some residual from Series 9 in a Dynamax format, because Amoonguss really, if you're afraid at this point that Amoonguss is going to get OHKO'd, then it's probably not going to come that turn, or we want to do something a little bit different with it. Because, you know, we saw that Focus Sash a lot in the last series, because it just wanted to get a sleep off. It just wanted to get something off before it went down. But Amoonguss has a little bit more sustainability now. So, you know, I like to see the other item usage on it. Speaking of Kyogre, let's swing over. And, you know, as I said, you know, Serena falling off. It's not falling off too much with the Kyogre teams. Still seeing Serena on about 63% of Kyogre teams, and we're seeing Rilaboom on 23. Here's the thing, though, is it's definitely not on the top, you know, the top mons list. But like you're really only seeing, actually it is on here, so you're only seeing Rilaboom and Serena on like 9% of teams together. So that's very interesting to note, you know, that people are usually choosing one or the other to go with. Not surprising that Kyogre's top teammate, though, is Tornadus. Tornadus with that prankster ability, I'm sure is coming up here. It looks like it is able to really take advantage of the rain. It's able to, you know, get tailwinds off with prankster. It's able to, you know, throw out really big damage when it wants to, and it's got a lot of move versatility, taunt, etc. But looking at Kyogre, again, Kyogre is one of those Pokemon that is just always in the meta, right? It is, if it's allowed in the format, it is meta. You can play it. You know, what we want to pair with it, you know, that's, again, it can be a little bit more creative. I love to see that the Shedinja is on 20% of Kyogre teams. I'm not recalling the first person that ran that, but that has to feel really good. That came out of that tournament. When we saw that Shedinja on that Kyogre team, it was like, what is this thing doing here? Is this thing a meme? But then you look at it and you realize how good it fits on that team, and how much damage it can really do. Or can't do to it, right? So it can switch around, it can flip-flop, it can ally switch, it can really just make you rage quit. But really good information. As far as what we're actually seeing on the Kyogre, we're seeing Mystic Water about half the time, so that's the most common item. The Choice Scarf makes a lot of sense, especially when we look at Water Spout. We want to get that thing off with as much HP as possible, because the move itself is just based on how much it reduces when your HP goes down. So very common to see that on the Kyogre. Next up, we have Shadow Calorics, and once again, when we look at Xerneas, Kyogre, and Calorics, it's really like 15 to 16% each, right? So if you're going to play 10 games on the ladder, you're probably going to see, these Pokemon, you're probably going to see these Pokemon 1 to 2 times each. And then you're going to see Zashian, and then you're probably going to see like one other thing, right? So, very, very interesting to note. But Calyrex Shadow, its Astral Barrage just does so much freaking damage. It just annihilates, its opponents. It's very difficult to overcome taking one of those before you get a chance to act. And with Regieleki being its top teammate, a lot of times Regieleki is carrying that Electro Web, which is going to drop your speed and allow that Calyrex Shadow to get a hit off. We're also seeing on this break from a little bit of the stuff that we saw in previous ones. Mian Xiao, which I imagine we're coming to, as well as Whimsicott, Tapu Lele, Nihilego, Stakataka, and Didi. So it really, running a Calyrex Shadow team actually brings kind of a whole different core to it. We still do see high usage for Incineroar, high usage for Rilaboom, but it does actually diversify a little bit what mons are being brought to each game. Speaking of the Taka, here is Staka, and it is, a really good Trick Room setter. It is, it hits Xerneas incredibly hard, right? It's not as afraid of some of the moves. Again, I think Stakataka was one that, was just a little bit afraid of Series 9 in the Dynamax meta. It kind of just got blown out if it wasn't able to get set up. And I think in Series 10 now, it's got a little bit more protection. So really good to see Stakataka coming back up. It's a really good Pokemon, like I said, with the Trick Room, the Body Press set. It is a Wide Guard user, which is great. Wide Guard can stop opposing Calyrex Shadow Astral Barrages. It can stop Dazzling Gleam. It can stop Water Spout dead in its tracks. So a lot of those things that it doesn't want to take, and other things on the team don't want to take, it's going to be able to prevent. Wide Guard is something that we obviously didn't see a lot of in previous seasons, series, but it's just very meta right now to at least think about how you wanna go about that. Really interesting with Stakataka. I think we're going to go down just a little bit further and, then take a look at some of the, at the 5%ers as well. So, next up is Serena. We talked a little bit about Serena already. It's really one of those mons that you really have to think, do I want, do I want Serena or do I want Rilaboom? I really think that, you know, having both is a little bit overkill in this format. But that Queenly Majesty ability, it blocks the priority moves of your opponent. So you can still use priority moves, but your opponent cannot. And that can really shut them down. It can really shut down Grassy Glide, it can shut out Fake Outs, it can shut out so many things. You know, other prankster users, etc. So Queenly Majesty is just an absolute nightmare to deal with when you're trying to circumvent some of the speed tiers with priority, and then you see something on the opposing side that blocks the priority. It can really limit what you're trying to do against your opponent. Typically run, it looks like, with an Assault Vest. Wide Lens is not surprising because it uses High Jump Kick, and High Jump Kick does like, I want to say it's like 40% damage or 60% damage when it misses. So like if you go to High Jump Kick and you miss, then and then you do a lot of damage to yourself. And so the Wide Lens increases the amount that it's going to hit. As well, Triple Axle is not 100%, neither is Power Whip. So not surprising to see the Wide Lens. Assault Vest gives a little bit more bulk. We see a few random berries on there and stuff, but really good, interesting tech. Tornadus, we'll take a look at Tornadus, which really pairs with Kyogre. I think you know, when it's on the field, 70% of the time, you know, Kyogre is going to be there as well. Kind of almost surprised it's not a little bit higher, because it really is a mon that pairs so well with Kyogre. But Serena is there as well, because once again, the Serena, the Tornadus, those really do go so well with the Kyogre. But outside of Kyogre, meh. You know, we also see that Shedinja there as well, and then some of the other usual suspects. We'll go about 3 more down, because I think these last 3 are pretty interesting, and then we'll just take a look and see if there's anything else that we missed. But I actually really like Urshifu Dark, but I think that the Urshifu Rapid Strike, the water fighting version, is just a little bit better in this particular format, just kind of with what everyone's trying to put together. You know, not surprising that Kyogre's on the list, that Tornadus is on the list, because you know, I feel like if you are going to bring the Urshifu single strike, you know, that, you know, you probably don't want to double up on those water, especially as we talked about Rilaboom being so good into it, potentially Serena. So it really doesn't surprise me that Tornadus, that pairs well with Kyogre, would also be on its teammate list because of that. We see that, you know, about 20% of the time that it comes, Zashian is also there. But if we look at Zashian, it's actually not even on Zashian's like top 10 list of partners. So that to me says that, you know, well, Urshifu single strike definitely needs to be respected. There's ways around it, I think, in this particular format, and a lot of people are just opting for the rapid strike as opposed. Indeedee, not surprising here. We're going to see Calorics Shadow be its primary teammate as far as restricted. Also Xerneas, so it is actually split for, you know, 25-21, but I think that either one makes a lot of sense, right? So obviously the big thing with Indeedee is that Indeedee provides that redirection support. And also, I mean, it provides the psychic terrain, right? So Calorics Shadow also does learn, you know, obviously it is part psychic, so it can take advantage of those psychic, that psychic terrain, and really just do a metric ton of damage. So it's really not surprising to see Calorics Shadow there. As well, it provides some decent support for Xerneas to get set up, right? So Xerneas wants to Geomancy, so that it can blow everything else out. And Indeedee sitting next to it is, you know, Indeedee might go down, but it's going to guarantee that goes up. And if Indeedee sticks around and Geomancy goes off, then your opponent's pretty much going to scoop, because it's going to be at a pretty big disadvantage. And how do I deal with that Xerneas? Last up here is, before we take a look at the other tier, is going to be Mienshao. So we actually saw Mienshao pop up on as a primary teammate of Calyrex Shadow. So it's not surprising that around 60% of the time that you're going to see Mienshao, you're also going to see Calyrex. We see a couple of these usual suspects underneath as well, and then Whimsicott, who's actually popping up in a couple slots, Neoligo, and then the Landorus. So Mienshao, the biggest thing here is it is a really good fighting mon. It does get access to Fake Out. It does get access to Wide Guard. We see it have Feint a lot of the times. It can Knock Off. It can Rock Slide. It can Quick Guard. In Taunt is huge. It can pivot out with U-Turn. What an amazing array of moves that Mienshao has access to. And its attack stat we see at 125, and it's pretty speedy at 105. So it's not surprising that we see that pick up a little bit for teams that are just kind of looking for a little bit more. It is a little bit on the frail side. We see its defense and special defense at 60 with HP at 65. So yeah, it's a little bit frail, but nothing a Focus Sash can't fix. The only problem there is then that's where you're using your Focus Sash. But I think a lot of Indeedee, if we just swing back to Indeedee, are actually opting for the Psychic Seed to go along with the terrain. Safety Goggles as well kind of makes sense so that it doesn't get put to sleep, doesn't get redirected, those kinds of things. Whoever's using a Light Orb on that is wild. There's about 5% of you out there that are wild. A couple other things I just want to note. Tapu Lele, I think also we'll see that probably come up with Calyrex Shadow, makes sense. Ditto is pretty decent. Calyrex Shadow seems to be the team. So I'm noticing a trend that, for anyone that is like kind of going off script in the usual suspects, it's really on those Calyrex teams, which is cool to note. Suicune, Blaine and I built with, Mike played with, and I think that's kind of a mon that I'm surprised at being as low as it is, but maybe it's just one of those ones that people don't know about. Suicune is really good. Gets access to Tailwind. It's not the fastest of Pokemon to set up Tailwind, but it's also not like always viewed as a big threat, right? So it's like, if I see Whimsicott come out, I know what Whimsicott's about to do. It's about to Tailwind, Helping Hand, and then go down, right? Suicune, is a little bit more on the bulky side, right? We see it at 115 defense and special defense, so it can actually take a lot of hits. And especially EV'd, right? I'm pretty sure you can EV that to take like a Grassy Glide and grassy terrain. And then you can kind of start firing some stuff off. The other nice thing too is once you get Tailwind up, then you can provide some additional support with things like Snarl. And when we talk about Xerneas being there, when we talk about when we talk about Xerneas, we talk about Kyogre, Calyrex, we can start dropping those special attack stats that they really want to have up. As well, Icy Wind is again just another really good supportive move. It does a little bit of damage depending, but it also provides that speed drop that helps your team just kind of get over the hump where needed. Leftovers makes a lot of sense to me, as well as a couple of these berries. Safety Goggles is cool. But the berries are and leftovers are really just gonna make sure that it sticks around a little bit more. When we look at even the EV spreads here, we're looking at Calm, we're looking at Bold. So it's really they're being EV'd, it looks like, to be able to tank some of those hits. So really like Suicune there, and hope we see that rise when we look again. Eternatus and Yveltal, as well as Groudon and Calyrex Ice. So those are all between like 4.3 and 4.5% usage. Eternatus I thought was going to actually pick up just a little bit of usage because it actually did pretty well in one of the tournaments. The Yveltal is actually one of those ones that I always want to do extremely well. It's a mon I truly enjoy. It's one of the one of the favorites. And I think that I always wanted to do well, but it just kind of gets outclassed right now by Xerneas. There's I think it would thrive a little bit more in a two restricted format, as well as I think Groudon would as well. Groudon, it's funny to say that like in series 9 with Dynamax, Sun was the way to go, and in series 10 without Dynamax, Rain is the way to go. But that just kind of seems to be the way that everything's shaping up so far. I would really like to see if we can maybe do something with a Groudon. I think that it's just very tough out there right now. I think that with a Groudon team, and not every time, but I think that when you run into things like Kyogre, I think it's just very difficult to get over that hump with Groudon. So we'll see if that picks up in the future. And the last one I think that we're going to touch on today is this Calorics Ice. So once again, we see that Calorics Ice is just not performing where the Calorics Shadow is so far. It's kind of, I don't know if it's surprising. I actually like it. I liked using it. But overall, I think, if I had to pick a Calyrex, I'm probably going with the Shadow Rider, just because of the dynamic speed, right? Or the speed that it has. And really, Calyrex Ice, if you're going that way, you have to commit to Trick Room, right? We have Mimikyu here, which can set Trick Room. Oranguru can set Trick Room. Stakataka can set Trick Room. Really what I'm getting at is, if you are bringing Calyrex Ice, you have to be in Trick Room. And there's so many ways, I think, to stop that, that it's tough. I also don't know if I love the item choice here. So the weakness policy on that assumes that you're going to take a hit. I think weakness policy is one of those items that Dynamax really just exploits. So outside of Dynamax, if a weakness policy does proc on Ice Force and you're in Trick Room, there's pretty much no way that your opponent's going to be able to win. But consistently getting into that position is going to be very difficult. So I think that's why we're only seeing Calyrex Ice at 5% or lower, and I'd really like to see it jump up more. So that's going to wrap up this section, and as we look through, if anyone wants to look through and leave a comment about a Pokemon that you think should be higher up on this list, I think that would be an awesome conversation for next time. So that's going to wrap up this portion of Pikalytics, and we'll swing back. So there we have it, our first rundown of the current meta from Pikalytics, as well as the usage, some of the items, some of the team compositions that we're commonly seeing across our matches on the ladder. So if you feel stumped and you don't know where to start, but you want to build a team, these folks that I have surrounding me are probably a pretty good place to start. As well, you can certainly leave a comment down below on the video if there's anything that you want us to go more in depth about. For Bridge 4 Games, I'm Tom, and we'll see you in the next one.